Proportions. In this lesson, we're going to focus on solving proportions because it can be a little bit tricky, and there are some tips and tricks that I want to show you and go over. So again, we looked at three different ways that we can look at finding the missing value in a proportion. And one of those ways is to look at if there is a whole number that we can either multiply or divide by. So 24 divided by 3 gives us 8. So 30 divided by 3 will give us x. So x is equal to 30 divided by 3. So x is equal to 10. So that's one way. Another way is to solve for the unknown by using our algebra skills. So we want to remove the number that's on the same side as your variable. In this case, it's 10, and we look at the operation that's happening between the n and the 10, and that's division. So the opposite of division is multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 10. So I'm going to multiply 10 by 1.5 over 4, and I'm going to multiply 10 by n over 10. N divided by 10, or 10 divided by 10 is 1, so I'm left with n on the right-hand side. 10 times 1.5 gives me 15. So 15 divided by 4 gives me n, and then 15 divided by 4 will give me 3.75, and so that's the value of n. So that's one way that you can solve for your missing variables. So either using our multiplication facts. If it works out to be a nice whole number, that's a quick and easy way to do that. If it's not, if we can't figure out what number is easier to figure out to multiply by, then we can use our algebra skills in order to isolate for the variable. Now that works great if they're already given to you as fractions, but sometimes your ratios and your proportions aren't going to be given to you as fractions. They might be expressed using the version of using colons. So what we could do is we could just rewrite this as fractions and then just solve it that way. So we have a over 35 is equal to 10 over 50. So all I'm doing is just taking this version of my ratios and expressing them as the fraction version. And then from there, I'm going to isolate for my a, or solve what my a is going to be. And I do that by, once you do this algebra step a lot of times, then you'll just realize that essentially what you're doing is you are moving over this denominator, and right now that's division. So when I bring it over, I have to multiply. So I'm going to have a on the one side, and it's going to equal 35 times 10 over 50. And then you just multiply your numerator together. So 35 times 10 is 350. And you're going to divide that by 50 to give you 7. And you can show these steps. Some people will go from here to the final answer because they do this work in their calculator. So then the next one, again, if it's not given to you as a fraction, it's easier just to write it as a fraction. So 4 over 12 is equal to some unknown number, that's c, over 15. And again, we want to isolate for c. We want to c all by itself. And we do that by multiplying both sides by 15. When we do that, the 15 disappears from the right-hand side in this equation. And so we are going to have 15 times 4 over 12. 15 times 4 is 60. And 60 divided by 12 is 5. So if it's not given to you as fractions for your ratios, just convert those into or rewrite them as fractions and then solve for your unknown that way. We'll go over a few more examples. Now, this one here is one that I can easily solve using my multiplication facts. So I know that 7 times 3 is going to be 21. So I'm going to take a look and figure out what it's going to be when I go in the opposite direction. So if 7 times 3 is 21, then a number times 3 is going to give me 7. Now, that's not going to work out nicely though, right? So that's okay. So I know if I'm going to go the opposite direction, so 7 to the x, I can do that division by 3. So x is equal to 7 divided by 3. And that works out to approximately 2.3. Now this 3 is a repeating decimal. It repeats forever and ever and ever. Sometimes people express this by using either a dot over top of the 3 to show that it repeats forever. Sometimes you might see it with a line over top to show that the 3 repeats forever as well. Or if you just want to express it as just 2.3 without one of these symbols, that would be acceptable as well. Now the problem with it being the unknown value being in the bottom of your fraction makes things a little bit more complicated. So we can't really truly do it using our traditional algebraic method where we can multiply by the denominator from both sides and then isolate the variable that way because our denominator is that unknown. So the easiest way to solve a question like this would be to flip both of your fractions. And that way, my unknown is going to be at the top of my fraction rather than at the bottom of the fraction. So all I've done is flip both of these fractions, and now I can solve for my unknown using the strategy that we learned in those previous examples, where we are multiplying both sides by 7, so it disappears from the left-hand side this time. So I have x is equal to 7 times 21 over 15. 7 times 21 is 147. I want to divide that by 15, and that works out to approximately 9.8. Again, if it's given to you as a ratio expressed with colons, just rewrite those as fractions. It's the easiest thing to do. So 33 over 12 is equal to y over 8. Okay, and again, you can use whatever strategy works best for you. If you want to do the cross multiplication method, even though technically it's not, some math teachers don't really like this method, but it works. So if you want to use that, if that's a strategy that's successful for you, then do that. That's fine. So we're doing 12 times y is equal to 33 times 8. 33 times 8 gives us 264. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 12. So that's the coefficient in front of your variable. Some people at this stage will just show that division at this step. They will cross out the 12s on the left-hand side. And then you are going to work out what 264 divided by 12 is, and that gives us 22. So as you can see, I'm showing you lots of different ways that people can sometimes express their solutions. You'll notice that it doesn't matter whatever method you use or whatever strategy you use, you're still going to get to that correct answer. So you find a strategy that gives you the correct answer consistently and stick with that method. So don't feel like you have to do one method over the other method if it's not working for you in terms of understanding what you need to do. So for h, what we need to do is we need to write our ratios as fractions. So 12 over 8 is equal to 30 over D. There's not a whole number that I can think of to multiply 12 in order to get 30. So I'm going to use one of the strategies I know in order to isolate for D. But because my D is at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and flip that fraction. So I have 8 over 12 is equal to D over 30. From there, I'm going to multiply both sides by 30 in order to isolate or get my letter all by itself. "30 divided by 30 is 1, so I'm left with D on the right-hand side. 30 times 8 is 240. So I have 240 divided by 12 is equal to D, and 240 divided by 12 gives me 20. And the last two examples, we're going to again just express this as a fraction instead of using colons. So C over 20 is equal to 56 over 50. And I'm going to isolate for C in order to solve for this unknown value. And I'm going to do that by multiplying both sides by 20. Some people will at this step show that you're multiplying by 20 here. So they just write that in quickly. And then they would cross those ones out. And then they would write C is equal to 20 times 56, which is 1,120. And divide that by 50. And using your calculator, you get an answer of 22.4. So lots of different strategies in order to solve for those unknowns. And last one, 7 over 20 is equal to B over 150. Again, I want to get my B all by itself. I want to isolate that variable, and I'm going to do that by multiplying both sides by 150. So again, I'm just going to write that in to my original question there. I'm going to solve 100 times 70, or 7, which is 1,050. That's going to be divided by 20. My 150s cancel each other out because that makes 1. So I'm left with just B on the right-hand side. And then the last thing I want to do is divide 1,050 by 20 to give me an answer of 52.5, and that is the value of B. If you have any questions about this, please reach out to me, send me an email, or sign up for a virtual help session, and I will see you in the next lesson.